Good evening, everyone. My name is John, and I'm the event coordinator here at McCandless Booksellers. Out of a true generosity of spirit, Prairie Fire has invited me to represent the very underserved demographic of a white middle-aged man as I kick off the evening. So thank you so much for having me be a part of the evening. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, and the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Iniwak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, the McCandless Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We are gathered here today to celebrate the launch of 50 Over 50. That is, of course, the first of a two-part special issue of Prairie Fire magazine celebrating women writers aged 50 and over in Canada, with this first volume focusing on all the incredible writers we have here in Manitoba, and artists, as you will see from this stunningly beautiful cover by Casey Adams. Our superstar host for the evening is the inimitable Charlene Diehl. Charlene is a writer, editor, performer, former English professor, and the long-term director of the Winnipeg International Writers Festival, an organization now called, with an exclamation point, Bloom Winnipeg. She has published poetry, essays, reviews, and a memoir, the beautiful, heartrending, and celebratory Out of Grief Singing, a memoir of motherhood and loss. She co-edited a jazz magazine for 12 years, and is the producer of the Izzy Asper Jazz Performances. In 2019, she was honored with the Winnipeg Arts Council's Making a Difference Award for her contributions to the local arts community. Please join me in giving a very raucous welcome to their host, Charlene Diehl.
Thank you, John. I think it's important that we have some men in the house, so here's to all of you men in the house. Ow! The cat calls beginning. This is absolutely a joy to be hosting tonight, and I just invite you to take a moment to scan your eyes over this table full of books. The new issue of Prairie Fire is there for purchase. You have to buy it before you leave the store. Do like that. And there's a bunch of other books here that represent this extraordinary lineup of writers. I am going to start by saying I hope that there's a plan to do a redo on this called 70 over 70, because damn it, I'm going to retire and I want to submit in that order. As John said, this is part 1 of 2, and the second part will be coming out in the spring of 2025. So we'll meet here again then. There's a couple of folks who are here in Winnipeg that are not able to join us tonight. One of them is Lise Gabory-Diallo, who is out of town, and the other is Debbie Schnitzer, who is out with some kind of nasty illness. So we'll basically send good vibes their way and wish they could be here with us. There are 10 women who won't be here because they live out of town, but most of them will be at a launch in Victoria on October 23rd. So if you're looking for a good excuse to like buy a ticket to Victoria for 2 weeks from now, that's a good reason. So this evening is going to be kind of a bunch of short snappers, with each of these writers getting 3 little minutes to share a little piece of their writing. It gives you a chance to kind of get a sample of the whole issue. But I'd like to start by introducing you to Katherine Bitney, who is one of the co-founders of Prairie Fire and a longtime supporter and advocate of the arts community, arts and writing community here in Winnipeg. And she was the guest editor of this issue. So would you please welcome Kate Bitney.
Good evening. This is really a momentous occasion, I have to say. I worked with the staff of Prairie Fire to choose all the writers, and it was difficult. So I'm just going to say a few words, well, quite a few words actually, about, because I can. Yes, I was one of the founding members of Prairie Fire. It was a long time ago, 78, 79, something like that. But we are now moving into the dark time of the year, the traditional time of remembering, honoring our ancestors, listening to our knowledge keepers. For us tonight, it is hearing, reading, learning from the accumulation of knowledge, experience, wisdom of women who have walked life paths for half a century and more. I want to think of such women as treasured keepers of memory and of the ancient craft of writing, and it is ancient. And by the way, the first written poem that we know of was written by a woman. Did you know that? Yeah, it's a Sumerian priestess by the name of Enheduanna. Look her up. And whose gift of these women is to share through writing their experience, their wisdom, humor, and their deep insights with the next generation and the next. Such women, one might say, are the wise women. And so this issue of Prairie Fire, 50 over 50, honors women writers who have weathered the storms and joys of 50 and more years of living as women and as writers in our culture and in our times, gathering and sharing story, honing their arts of storytelling, of poetry, drawing on their great store of memory. Respect to them. And who could have imagined when we put out the call for 50 over 50 that we would be inundated with over 1,000 submissions? It was actually 1,100. Yeah. Wow. Such an outpouring of writings from so many women 50 and over. And such delight that there is an audience, an eager readership for the writing of women past the half-century mark of their lives, a place for their voices and stories to be read and heard. In the 45-year plus history of Prairie Fire's publishing special issues, and we've done a lot, or they've done a lot, this is the largest number of submissions ever received. Well, I need to point out how difficult it has been to choose 50 out of 1,100 submissions. And such a winnowing required nerves of steel, believe me, as we had to pass upon so many excellent pieces of writing, and I'm very sorry for that. We asked for submissions in 3 categories: fiction, creative nonfiction, and poetry. And the submissions, as noted, poured in. And you would think from this outpouring, wouldn't you, that this was a literary demographic finding it difficult at times to be heard and respected. So yes, this issue is about the often hidden and perhaps too often neglected women who have lived that half century or more, whose stories hearken to the past, their own memories, or perhaps those of an ancestor. What we look for first in our submissions, always, is quality of writing, skill with language, form, dedication to craftsmanship. Second, we look for diversity of culture, sexual orientation, social media background, life experience, of imagination, and diversity of subject matter. Pulling all this together was no small task, but always in the reading of pleasure, a revelation, every one of them. And we looked for work from across the country, east to west, north to south, and we got them. A geography of women's voices, one might say. But it became obvious that we could not fit 50 pieces into one issue. There was no way. So there will be, as noted, 2 consecutive issues of Prairie Fire of 25 pieces each. Herewith, than the first 25 of our choices. There are names you will recognize, names you will not know, hidden voices, one might say, and hidden stories. For me, as one of a handful of locals who was there at the beginning, when what is now Prairie Fire was but a pipe dream, this proliferation of voices is both astonishing and a long hoped for outcome in our creation back in the late 1970s. Yes, it was that long ago, of the Forum for New Writing in Manitoba. Prairie Fire, at first Writers News Manitoba, as some of you will remember, grew to become one of the most prestigious and longest lasting of Canada's literary magazines, and still is. Judging by the number of submissions we received and by the commentary of submitters, acknowledging that being published in Prairie Fire is a feather in one's literary cap. And by the number of well-known authors who submitted, many of whom were at the beginning of their careers when Prairie Fire was still young, and they're still here. Let me conclude by saying this. It was quite a challenge to read through those hundreds and hundreds of submissions, but it was also a pleasure and an eye-opener to the enormous variety of voices, stories, poetic styles that are being created by women over 50, women like me. Sometimes our voices get lost in the crowning of newer and younger writers, but yes, we're out there, calling in ancestral and autobiographical voices, keeping the flames of the past and of life experience burning. I will admit that it was a Herculean task to read them all, but one for which I am very grateful. I thank every one of the women who submitted for the opportunity to read them, those whose works were chosen, those whose work was not. For that look in and listen, for the learning from all those minds so alive with thought, compassion, anger, grief, fantasy and magic, wisdom and memory. And I thank Prairie Fire for inviting me along on this journey of discovery and rediscovery. May these stories and poems stand as a testament and testimony to the experience, the skill, the memory, and the eye of wisdom each writer has acquired in her lifetime, and for the gift of sharing them with us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. That gives us a sense of the magnitude of the undertaking and also the extraordinary wealth of writing from the 50 over 50s. Our first reader is Casey Adams, who is an artist, also an artist who created this beautiful cover. So if you haven't seen this up close, like it is absolutely stunning. And just a second here, get my notes organized. Casey is a relational maker, educator, activist, and mentor living in Winnipeg. She creates work that explores technology in relationship to her Indigenous culture. She's an award-winning, nationally and internationally known maker with a BFA from Concordia University and an MA in Cultural Studies from the U of Winnipeg. Please welcome Casey Adams.
Mino Takasin, Kapapama Pamanat, Makaswayun, Besel. I said good evening in Innu. I also said my Cree name is Flying Overhead in Circles Eagle Woman. And I'm so absolutely honored and just thrilled to be in front of each and every one of you and to be part of this really incredible publication. I've been writing poetry since I was young, but my twin sister was considered the poet, so I never thought of submitting. But when I saw the call, I threw away all my fears and I thought, I'm gonna apply. And then I think it was May I got an email asking if I could do the cover, and I thought, oh, well, I guess I didn't get picked to be in the publication, but at least I can do the cover. And I was thinking about Katherine's words and what she envisioned, and the fact that there were so many submissions. I was thinking about, as women, the knowledge that we have at our age. And that's where this cover came from. Now, to be honest with you, I was actually inspired by Nahani Fontaine and all the good work she does in the community. And so if you look real hard, it's kind of after her, and the landscape is actually the white shell. So imagine my surprise when I got an email maybe a month later, saying that I got into the publication, and I'm absolutely thrilled to read this poem to you. It's a diptych, but I'll just read the one part. I just realized, oh my goodness, I forgot to grab my glasses. Okay, I'll try to. Oh, thank you. Oh wait, okay, I don't know if this will work. It sort of does. Okay. Appropriating the white box. My performance had to be convincing. I set aside my scrunchies, Guess jeans, and Root sweatshirts. I put on my black armor, but not some tee with 80s hairband or a hoodie with cheap text. No, it was a little black dress with kitten heels and a sophisticated bob. I had no weapon, only my fear to guide me. I needed to blend in like my paints, but no red. Until I was no longer the model and executing the critique, obnoxious, apathetic, contentious, isolated, obsessive. They were my methods of immersion. I fell in line to reach the site-specific avant-garde. I conceptually grappled with my minimalistic soul. I could not discern my futurism framework. The surreal reality was finding an aesthetic before they found out I was a fake.
Thank you, Casey. Our next reader is Jody Baltessen. You know, I didn't actually ask you how to say that surname. You can correct it when you get up here. She's an award-winning poet, writer, and retired archivist living in Winnipeg. Her work has appeared in Prairie Fire, Grain, Hamilton Arts and Letters, Pangyris, and elsewhere. And she was a guest of the festival last year, and it was my delight to get to meet her in person. Please welcome Jody Baltessen.
Wow. It is my absolute honor to be included in with the women who I have admired all of my writing career. And yeah, I'm a little bit blown away, so just bear with me for a second here. I think when I wrote this piece, I was really focused on the second part of the call, 50 over 50, and that's what this piece looks toward. It's called Sum Total, SUM. I tally my days, foresee a final count. That is to say, I hear a tightening within the story that contains me. The syntax of minutes and hours, of sky and sky and sky, each billow of cloud, the cursive wind, a language of movement, moisture, calm, pronouncing the slowing down of accrual. When I was fluid text, I let myself spill out. The difference between close and distant, liquid That is to say, my instinct was to take action, to rise in a pattern of swells, like heat in summer, brooding toward downpour. Now I stand consumed by weather. Nitrogen, oxygen, argon. That is to say, every laden molecule enters into the weight of my body. And once inside, the seasons, atmospheric, hungry for space, expand, bluster into contradiction, thrum. I hold them, and they score the soft tissue of my poems.
Jody, isn't it so lovely to be read to? Our next writer is Donna Besel, who loves writing of all kinds and does presentations for schools, libraries, universities, conferences, and retreats. Her work has gained recognition from CBC Literary Awards, won national contests, and appeared in literary journals, magazines, and anthologies. She's also published 2 best-selling books. Please welcome Donna.
Yeah, I've got a croakiness in me, so that's why the mask. So I just want to say a couple of things before I start. Yesterday was International Ageism Awareness Day. It's fitting. Yes. I want to thank Kate for all her work, all the Prairie Fire crew for all their work. I'm honored to be in the lineup. And here's a very important announcement. It's very important to me. I just told John, my book, The Unraveling, Incest and the Destruction of a Family, has been rebooted. It was not available for a while, but it's rebooted. The University of Regina Press is putting it out there again. So I would like a resounding cheer. More resounding, please. Okay. I grew up in the White Shell, the West Dock Lake. So there, and this is sort of based on a character that was around. So, Bicycle Pete. Krista was almost 14. She tried, but couldn't remember the first time she saw Bicycle Pete. Ever since she started elementary school, kids on the bus rushed to the windows to point and laugh when they spotted him. They'd stick their heads out, waving wildly. Hey, Pete, where you headed, Pete? He didn't respond or glance at the bus. Pete owned an old red bicycle, but never rode it. He pushed it along the narrow shoulders of the winding highway. Burlap bags and dirty pails hung from the handlebars. On its wobbly frame, he tied tin cans and bags and rags. Pardon me, rags. Krista assumed the scruffy man was old, but she couldn't be sure. She'd only glimpsed him from the bus. He wore a dirty wool hat pulled over his ears, summer and winter. I'm looking at you, Kristen Emily. That's a joke, sorry. Yeah, okay. Sorry, that was stupid, sorry. His tawny hair hung off his head like 2 ropes. Day after day, year after year, stubble on his cheeks endured. Never beard length, never clean shaven. A dark, baggy coat, worn with dark, baggy pants, obscured his body and made it hard to determine his physique. A black and white dog with quick feet and focused attention followed him as he trudged beside the highway. Krista thought it might be, or must be, a border collie. So I'm skipping ahead in the stories, summary, blah, blah, blah. Pete And this is a fact, Pete stayed behind after the gold mine that was in West Hawk Lake, Star Lake area was abandoned. So he was living in the bush in a shack. So Krista in the story has a couple of encounters with him, including an episode of bullying with her brother and his friends. So Krista didn't see Pete again until 2 weeks later when she was riding her mare, Bella, along an old road on the north side of Lost Lake, close to the mine. Dense mixed forest surrounded the trail on both sides. On this Saturday afternoon, the sun burned through the still air. Her horse ambled along the path, lulled by unseasonable heat. Excuse me, an absence of insects. Waxy leaves dangled on poplar bushes, parched and spent, ready to fade and drop at first sign of frost. So it's this time of year. Girl and horse felt sedated by the rhythmic movements and led in quiet. Without warning, her horse stiffened and halted. If she'd been moving at a trot or a canter, Krista would have sailed over the mare's head. Bella blew out a whistling snort and stretched her neck to get a better look. Krista heard a scraping noise like logs being peeled. Clouds of bark floated from the nearest pine tree, fluttering onto the grass. A full-grown black bear skidded down the tree trunk, fluttering onto the grass. Pardon me, down the tree trunk, shedding more bark as it plummeted. Krista swallowed a sudden catch in her throat and gathered the reins in both hands. The mare backed several steps, her muscles shifting woodenly beneath the girl's thighs. The bear landed with a sodden plop on its rear end. Then it rose to its full height, excuse me, and placed both paws on the tree it had vacated. The nearsighted animal sniffed, waving its head, searching for the source of the unfamiliar scent. Bella backed up a few more steps, dragging each foot through the dirt. The bear kept leaning against a tree and peered in all directions, snuffling loudly. Then a black and white blur rushed toward them. The bear dropped on all fours and faced the intruder, a small creature dashing around the pine tree, flinging up clods of dirt. It took Krista a few seconds to recognize it as a medium-sized mutt with teeth snapping higher and higher scales of fury. Every time the bear spun around, the dog vanished and reappeared, snarling and nipping. Bella backed away from the battling pair, but still didn't bolt. The bear stopped spinning and squinted at the horse, unable to recognize this strange creature. Seizing upon this distraction, the dog darted at the dark haunches and chomped. The bear roared in agony and swung its right paw. When the dog ducked behind the pine tree, the bear charged again, but kept running. The dog didn't give chase. Instead, it flopped down, panting. It remained flattened in the dirt, its tongue hanging out like a bright red rag. It was Bicycle Pete's collie. And guess what happens next?
One more reason to buy the issue, because you have to know what happens after that. Thank you, Donna Besel. Di Brandt is our next writer. She's published more than a dozen acclaimed and multiple award-winning books of poetry, fiction, literary criticism, and creative essays. She served as Winnipeg's inaugural Poet Laureate in 2018 and 2019. Di received the Manitoba Arts Council Distinction Award, as well as an honorary doctorate from the Grant MacEwan University in Alberta. Her most recent book, The Sweetest Dance on Earth, New and Selected Poems, was published recently by Turnstone Press. Please welcome Di Brandt.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, Prairie Fire, for
inviting me to be in this issue, and congratulations on your ongoing beautiful work and success and generosity in serving the literary community of Winnipeg in Canada so beautifully. Great admiration for the longevity and stamina and focus and precision required to keep doing this for a very long at all and for such a long time. And I have spent a few years as a poetry editor for Prairie Fire some time ago, so I know a little bit about how much work it is to put out a single issue and how much devotion is put into every page. So thank you very much for that. And so lovely to be here in the company of so many longtime colleagues and friends and also new colleagues. I was thinking on my way here that, you know, really as a species, we are a very slow cooking species. It does take a while to get to that place where I'm glad I've lived long enough to get to that place where I feel like I sort of know a little bit about how things are now. So my poem is about the future, or imagining a future. One of the imagined futures. It's called Crimson Feathered Birds. In another moment, Sebastian, we will sail on the bright white spirit river that flows through the lit up galaxies and burbles around its whirling sapphire and ruby encrusted stones. You will be standing in the prow of our translucent little spirit ship, solar winds dancing in your gently ruffled dark hair. I will be sitting behind you in my rainbow-colored hand-woven skirt and shawl, my gold-streaked hair braided in the old way, humming. We are not going anywhere. We are already there. You are waving to the raucous crimson-feathered birds flitting above the jade and neon-tinted trees along the shore. I am weaving old-fashioned circlets of orchids and daisies to share with the forest and river people we meet in that crystalline air. Flash of meteoric showers, burst of galactic starlight, and we are off, up, up, through swirling rapids and foaming eddies and rushing falls. Pierce of high notes, circling everywhere, flutes and cymbals and strings. Brush of angelic spirit fairy wings, the divine day.
That is in the future we don't like to have a taste of if it's all the same with the powers. Our next writer is Ariel Gordon, a writer, editor, and enthusiast. I think everybody in this room can probably attest to the enthusiasm part, since most of us in this room have been encouraged to holler, yell, boo, or whatever at Ariel, and she might actually even ask that of you today. I can't promise. Her essay, Red River Mudlark, won second place in the 2022 Kloppenberg Hybrid Green Contest in Green Magazine. Her fourth collection of poetry, Sightseeing, Writing Nature and Climate Across the Prairies, was written in collaboration with Saskatchewan poet Brenda Schmidt and was published in 2023. Her second book of creative nonfiction, Fungal, Foraging in the Urban Forest, was published this spring. And she was part of the festival this past month, guiding a long, interesting walk through Assiniboine Forest. Please welcome Ariel Gordon.
Short people. My essay is about what I call the funny mean traits of my Scottish-Irish family. And the essay is about the transmission of cultural practices and heritage, and me realizing that the only one that my family had, or at least that side of the family had, was being funny mean. And then someone pointed out that that actually is something that Scottish and Irish people do. They're just mean to people while being funny. So I'm within that tradition. And my essay is long, and so I'm just gonna skip to the part where my daughter insults me. When my daughter Anna was small and being left in the care of her father so I could go out with friends or to a bookish event, she would say, "You look beautiful, Mommy." She was my outfit checker because Mike would always say, "You look fine," without really looking at me. He tells me that he looked at me once when we were first dating. And when pushed, he says that I always look nice. But now that Anna's a smart-ass teenager, things have shifted. The night I launched my 4th book of poetry, for instance, I came down with freshly washed hair with product in it, where I was hoping to encourage the curl, which is the mantra of every woman with wavy but not curly hair, and was letting it air dry. And Anna glanced at me and said, "You look like sweaty Loki." By which she meant Tom Hiddleston as the Norse god Loki in the recent Marvel movies / TV shows, who has been given chin-length curly brown hair that gets kind of curly wet after he's been running around being funny mean. Except Loki is also murderous and power hungry. Now, I laughed my head off when she said it. And later that night, I repeated what Anna had said from the podium, and everyone laughed. I mean, I felt powerful, but also joked at. And the difference was I was in control of the joke. I had made it at my own expense. Now, a few weeks later, I came down wearing what I call fanciful tights from a company called Sweet Legs, and they had orange dragons on them. I was also wearing a long orange sweater over a denim shirt over an orange shirt. Anna wrinkled her nose and said, "You look like a Scandinavian Moomin gift shop employee." And I laughed, and I even wrote down her latest excellent insult, so I'd remember it. But here's the kicker. So the tights were new and slightly outside my usual range of mulch-colored clothing. Clothing that I could comfortably go for a walk in the woods in. And so buying and wearing them was me trying out new things. And Anna had made me feel sort of unsure of myself, of my choices. And I'm a pretty confident person, so those feelings were new. Now, I couldn't tell if I felt unsure about the dragon tights or the mushroom tights with fairies on them, because I actually felt that way, or because Anna had made fun of me. So I had a talk with her about using her funny mean superpower as a force for good. And that's all I'm gonna say. Thank you. Oh, okay. Because you were set up that I have to do this now, I need everyone to raise your fist and gesticulate. And if you want to make like angry faces, and I will take a picture and post it to social media because I think that's funny. And you here are just here to make me laugh. So at the count of 3, I need some raised fists, people. Come on, you can do it. Are you ready? Are you gesticulating? 1, 2, 3, growl, go! See, that's what I really came for. Thank you.
Wasn't curious that she just succeeded in making all of us be funny mean. Well done, Ariel. Nancy Hall is our next writer. Her fiction has appeared in Grain and her nonfiction in a variety of Canadian publications. She's a renowned fiber artist, and her work has toured and been shown in galleries across Western Canada and California. She lives on a small organic farm a stone's throw from Lake Winnipeg. Please welcome Nancy Hall.
Thank you for including me in this unbelievable gathering. Okay, so In India, every year countless cotton farmers commit suicide because they are so overwhelmed by debt to the seed companies who will have them jailed if they, if they save seeds for the following year's crop. The promised large yields don't materialize, so there's no money to buy the next year's seeds. The debt carries over, eventually swamping the farmers. They often use the prescribed herbicides, potions, to kill themselves. So my poem is called Tablecloth. I don't think of the women in India who have labored to pick the cotton grown from seeds genetically modified to accommodate the herbicides their husbands will eventually drink. I don't think of those husbands sold a bill of goods by seed companies promising robust yields, unimagined profits, bounty that never materializes, though prison does to those who save the seeds. I don't think of the men who lose their land, whose children starve, whose women weep, all for the cotton I now hold in my hand. I unfurl this new cloth on my Christmas table, marveling at the richness of color, the fineness of the fabric. I take a moment to savor the righteousness of having bought this directly from the village artisan. Then I call my family into the feast. I'm the ghosts of those Indian farmers indentured to the seed companies, debt so deep they drank the potion. Those silent, judging specters sit down with us to dinner.
Requires a calm moment. Thank you, Nancy. Mary Horodyski, again, I didn't check the pronunciation, so that one might need some help. Has been published in Prairie Fire, the Dalhousie Review, Fireweed, Manitoba History, Prairie History, Rim, Grain, and Rampike. She's also an occasional book reviewer for the Winnipeg Free Press. After a long diversion, her contribution to 50 over 50 is her first foray back into writing fiction. Please welcome Mary Horodyski.
Thanks, Prairie Fire and Katherine, and thanks everyone for coming today. I also want to thank two of the Winnipeg Public Library's writers and residents who gave me advice on this story, Duncan Thornton and Susie Maloney. And since I'm here, I want to thank David Arneson for all of his generous enthusiasm. I think many of us have been the recipient of that. Almost 40 years ago, he gave me the opportunity to publish a chapbook of poetry with Tremstone Press. And I said, no, I can't do it, I'm not ready. And he said, that's funny, never heard a male writer say that. So that was that. So I'm gonna read from my story called What Matters. 3 months from now, on a hot August afternoon, Lloyd will die. But on this sweet May evening, the scent of crabapple blossoms drifts through the hallway window. Margaret stands barefoot in a long white nightgown, eavesdropping on Lloyd and their daughter Marnie. She hears Marnie tell Lloyd that she hates her name. Lloyd says, well then, change it, little ducky duck. Margaret can picture Lloyd in the living room in his brown Mr. Rogers cardigan by the end table stacked with books. If he had a beard, he would be stroking it. Change is the stuff of life, he adds. Margaret wishes Marnie came to her for name ideas. She might have suggested Veronica or Zora. She pauses in case Marnie comes back, but there is nothing more to hear but Lloyd humming and flipping book pages. Up until recently, Lloyd had been an excellent lawyer. Excellent, meaning making a lot of money, Margaret was fond of saying, leaning back with a drink. She liked to play a kind of smart-talking Doris Day, but with alcohol. Ah, yes, said Lloyd, excellent, a lot of money. Then he'd pat his stomach, which was lean. Margaret said, you should pat your wallet. That's the bad part. Filled with greenery from his father's firm, Margaret knew, but didn't add. That was their routine until just a few weeks ago when Lloyd waltzed into the kitchen in the middle of the afternoon. He carried several shopping bags and gave a wink to Margaret while doing a few soft shoe steps. With a flourish, he pulled out a bottle of 18-year-old scotch, a potted crocus from Safeway, and a stack of hardcover books from McNally. He waved the crocus pot under her nose and bowed, "Flowers for my lady." Some dirt fell on her blouse. Margaret brushed it off and glared at him. "Lloyd, what are you doing here?" "I've retired, Margaret. I've retired from the rat race and I'm settling down with my piece of cheese." "Retired?" Margaret raised her voice. "You're not even 55. None of their friends were retired. They all imagined themselves integral to the economy of Winnipeg, captains of industry. Their mission was to sail forth every sunrise, not jump off in the afternoon and swim to the nearest island." Margaret herself knew a little about sudden life changes. A few years ago, she had found a lump in her breast a month before her 47th birthday. It turned out to be fibroids, not cancer. But it was enough for her to say, "I saw the void." She began calling herself Maggie and took a class in film studies. When she flew to Toronto for the film festival in September, she stayed all the way through November, racking up hotel bills and shooting an experimental video with a group of students she met at the Ontario College of Art. Lloyd, in his mean moments, accused her of running away to Toronto with a rock band, like Maggie Trudeau. But Margaret argued she hadn't run away. Everyone had known her address in Toronto. "Yes, I remember," Lloyd replied. "This was the bitter counterpart to their fat wallet routine. That's where I sent you checks." That Christmas, he gave her a heavy Buddha statue and a large indoor water fountain, as though she thought he was trying to put out her fire, not stoke it.
Pretty much everybody in this room is walking out with a copy because we all need to know what comes next. Thank you, Mary. Our next writer is Katherine Hunter, whose previous works include a novel, After Light, and the poetry collection, St. Boniface Elegies, which I heard in an early version and it made me weep. It was shortlisted for the Governor General's Award, which is probably slightly more important than me weeping over it, but I'll leave you to judge that. No, Katherine, oh, bless you. Her story, Calling You, previously published in Prairie Fire, won gold at the Canadian National Magazine Awards. She's recently retired from a long career guiding young writers at the University of Winnipeg. Please welcome Katherine Hunter. Thank you, Charlene. Oh, there's quite a few people here.
Thanks everybody for coming, and thank you so much, Kate Bitney, for your work on this issue, and of course to Carol, and I don't see Carol, but to Janine and you know. Lindsay, because I wanted to say child, no, Lindsay, child. No. Anyway, obviously I practiced this very carefully. So this is from a story called Renovation Materials. And this is kind of the, I would say the Reader's Digest condensed version of the story. In the middle of the second winter, I grew restless and began to scrape the paper off the bedroom walls. Later, I got carried away and decided to redo the whole room. I pried off the old baseboards. They split into pointed shards, long and bristling with nails. Where to put these monstrosities? I figured I'd stash them outside and deal with them in spring. I dragged them outside and let them fall on the back deck with a great clatter. Instantly, a little red squirrel came flying out from under the deck and shot to the top of the cottonwood tree. Sorry, I said. I knew how he felt. Then I examined the green shag carpet. It was dingy. No, it was filthy. How old was it anyway? I thought of the 3 cats. No, there were 5. 5 cats who had lived with us over the years. I thought of the coffee and wine that we had spilled in that room. And all the mornings we'd forgotten things and come running back in here with our muddy shoes or wet boots on. The carpet was too big to be rolled up, and it had a double backing of tightly woven jute, so it was coarse and scratchy and too stiff to bend. So I flopped sections of it over top of other sections and managed to pummel this amorphous green mass to the back of the house and squeeze it out through the door and abandon it there in the snow beside the hazardous jumble of baseboards. At first, the red squirrel was suspicious of the strange new green thing. It had landed with no warning, like an alien spaceship. Yet he knew it didn't come from another planet. It reeked of earthlings. Every time he had to cross the deck to get to his cache of acorns, he avoided it. Then one day, as he hurried past, he heard the great whoosh of wings and saw a huge crow swooping down upon him through the falling snow, its eye glinting and its long talons open and its knife blade of a beak mere inches away from his eye. The squirrel faked a right and darted left, scrambling into a dent in the side of the green thing and wriggling in as far as he could. It was a narrow opening, too small for the crow, who landed on the roof of it. The squirrel could hear its feet scritching overhead. He flattened himself against the cave wall and stayed still as a stone until the crow finally let out two angry caw, caw, and flew away. The squirrel remained motionless, daring only to shift his eyeballs to peer down the long dark tunnel at the back of the cave. He sniffed and caught a faint feline whiff that made him cower, imagining the sharp fangs and claws of the beast. He strained to listen. No sound. He sniffed again and realized that scent was stale. Whatever cats had left their stink in the green thing were long gone. The squirrel relaxed, as much as it's possible for a squirrel to relax. And gradually, as time passed and nothing else happened, he felt a strange sensation seep into his bones. He was warm.
Our next writer is Sarah Klassen. Sarah has published 8 collections of poetry. She launched her second novel, The Russian Daughter, in 2022. And in 2023, a collaborative translation with Joanne Epp and Sally Ito of 17th century sonnets by Austrian poet Katharina Regina von Griffenberg from German to English, titled Wonderwork. I would add that Sarah is one of the writers in this community who has sort of carried the torch for beautiful, thoughtful writing for more decades than most of us can count. And she's still full of beautiful words. Please welcome Sarah Klassen.
Thank you, Charlene. It's a nice looking audience. Thank you all for coming. And I add my thanks to Kate and the Prairie Fire crew, all of them, for the work you've put into this effort. Thanks. Bus shelter. What occupies God's mind while waiting for the next bus, heading west or heading east? God's hands rest firmly on God's knees, legs crossed at the ankles. Keen curiosity, or is it compassion in that patient gaze? Each baffled traveler accounted for, arrivals and departures noted. God knows which head is crammed with information for exams, splitting with another migraine, which bent back aches from labor, which heart overflows with gratitude or throbs with anger. Opposite God, Someone breaks into laughter over life's absurdities. God gets the joke, and with a straight face, fishes in her pocket for a ticket.
That's wonderful. Our next writer is Rowan McCandless, a Governor General's finalist in the nonfiction category with her book Persephone's Children, A Life in Fragments, which also won the Eileen McTavish Sykes Award for Best First Book. Most recently, she won the Craft Memoir Prize with her piece Split Ends. Her creative nonfiction piece, Blood Tithes, A Primer, won a National Magazine Award, and her short story Castaways was in the Journey Prize Stories. Please welcome Rowan McCandless.
Ooh, it's pretty full in here. Thank you, Prairie Fire, and thank you to all the people who contributed to this wonderful, thank you, this wonderful project. I'm so honored to be a part of it. I'm going to read from a creative nonfiction piece called Geography of Grief. But I will say, not to give things away, it all turns out well in the end. With a month and a half left into my daughter's pregnancy, I decided to drive from Winnipeg to Calgary to be with Beth and her husband, Jason, all because of a dream. A few weeks prior to leaving, I started having a reoccurring nightmare that haunted and heightened my fears. I dreamt of my daughter lying beneath a hospital blanket on a metal gurney in an operating room, blood, viscous and vermilion everywhere. In the dream, I was trapped behind a glass barrier. I couldn't reach Beth, no matter how hard I tried. I frantically packed and arranged for someone to look after my house. I've had premonitions before come to fruition in the past concerning loved ones and on matters of lesser importance, which is why I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want people to worry, especially my daughter. Friends and family said, relax, Beth's not due for weeks, there's plenty of time. My silence disagreed with them. Back in February, when Beth had told me she was pregnant, I heard the excitement in her voice. After years of suffering from severe uterine fibroids, she was finally expecting. But the fibroids made her pregnancy high risk. They proliferated as the baby grew. At 7 months, my daughter's belly looked like she was carrying quintuplets. Beth's entire pregnancy, I worried about what could go wrong. Miscarriage, a premature delivery. I wondered if I had genetically passed on the occurrence of fibroids, given that Black women have 3 times the likelihood of developing the condition, especially in its most extreme form. I thought about the devastation if Beth lost the baby, and yet I never considered the idea of losing my daughter until the repetitive nightmare took primacy. The westward trek on the Trans-Canada Highway out of Winnipeg was marked by the racetrack, the exhibition fairgrounds, and the ghostly remains of a drive-in movie theater. At 7 on a warm August morning, I headed out of the city with a full tank of gas, a road trip playlist, Google Maps, and my favorite photograph of Beth and her sisters propped on my dashboard. My first stop was a Petrochem station just outside of Brandon. The gas station's parking lot was expansive, which was a plus. There was plenty of room to gas up, park, and for the dog to stretch his legs. Positioned near the edge of a swath of prairie grass and tall weeds was a clutch of teenage boys smoking cigarettes. Parked near the edge of the swath of prairie grass and tall weeds, texts began to trickle in from my son-in-law. Jason informed me that they were in an ambulance. A routine ultrasound discovered the baby's heart rate was dipping low. then high, necessitating the rush to the hospital and the likelihood of emergency C-section. So far away from Beth, I felt helpless. I felt useless. All I could offer was my love and prayers and faith that everything would be okay. I was terrified that it wouldn't be enough. Trembling, I looked out onto an expansive open field, understanding the true definition of terror. When I went inside to pay for the gas, I relayed what was happening with my daughter. I couldn't bear the weight of the news on my own. I needed a moment to talk to someone, anyone, even if that person was a stranger and far more used to giving directions than hearing the news I would share because of my state of panic. The kindly gas station attendant reassured me that everything would be okay. I desperately wanted to believe him. Thank you. The baby's okay, she just turned 7 this August, so yeah.
Pretty certain that Beth was very happy to see her mother too. Our next writer is Daria Salamon, the author of The Prairie Bridesmaid and co-author of Don't Try This at Home, One Family's Misadventures Around the World. Daria's work has appeared in many publications, including the New York Times, Washington Post, Today's Parent, and Prairie Fire. Daria is a force to be reckoned with, has been directing a lot of high school kids in and out of the writing life, and she's got a little bit of a misadventure to tell you about on her own. So would you please welcome Daria Salamon.
Correct, there are a lot of people here. Okay. Yeah, sure. I'm new to this club, but it's really great. It's Club 50. I just snuck in probably about a year or two. I have something wrong with my neck that I can't quite pronounce, and it would require me to read like this, and the words might not be in the right order due to some pet migraines. So I didn't want to miss this opportunity, so I just thought I'd take a minute or two and just talk about what I submitted in the genesis of the piece. So I was doing my master's degree at University of British Columbia, and Kevin Chong was my professor, and he gave us a task. He said, I'd like you to write a personal essay answering a question that you don't know the answer to. And so usually when I write, maybe other people as well, I start here at the beginning and I have the end. And the writing is the journey from the beginning to the end. But there's no end in this particular task. He's sneaky that way. Kevin also wrote Benny, Secret Life of Benny Yu. It just was shortlisted for the Giller, fabulous book. And so I was out with my friend Andrew Davidson, who wrote The Gargoyle, and I was lamenting, whining, complaining about the stupid assignment that I had to do. And we arrived at Stella's, and he had forgotten his keys, and he was quite upset. And he asked if we could go back to his house because he had to leave his house open. And so we did go back to his house. I sometimes think he just wants to go there so he can show off his 37 translations of his novel. I didn't get one, so I guess I'm just a little bitter. And so so we went there, and he said, why don't you do what it means to lose your keys as your question? And so I did. I wrote an essay on what it means to lose your keys. And I would like to thank Kate for selecting it and Prairie Fire for all the work you've done. I didn't show this essay to anybody. I just kind of hung on to it. But I wrote it. And it was an essay that took me to a lot of places. I wrote the themes on the back of my physio receipt. It's like, that was like $97. Okay, so I think if I had written this essay, I might have touched on like one theme at the end or wanted to get to one place. That's kind of how I work. But this essay took me to all sorts of unexpected places: freedom, family connections, sexual assault, friendship, aging, loss, and community were just a few of the things that emerged unexpectedly from this essay. So I'd like to thank Kevin for the assignment. I'd like to thank Andrew for the idea. And I'd like to thank Kate for choosing it. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming today. And I am absolutely blown away to be in the company of such talented and powerful women. And that's it. Thank you.
Book times to hang out with Daria because her misadventures are always so funny and they always have sort of a nice rich little nugget in there. So thank you, Daria. Our next writer is Barbara Schott, who I have to say has been in one of my precious people for probably almost as many decades as Daria is old. She's a lifelong Winnipegger who worked in the fashion industry for 32 years until she retired. She's one of the poetry editors for Prairie Fire and delighted to be included in this fine company of women. She is a beautiful voice and a deep thinker. Please welcome Barbara Schott.
I'm delighted to be here tonight. Thank you, Prairie Fire, for the opportunity to submit, and Kate Bitney for selecting my poem. And Casey Adams, I had the pleasure of sitting with you and your sister at dinner, and I think this incredible cover, which I'm going to get framed, captures the diffidence and the confidence of us women over 50. Woo. So, unfortunately, given what's happening in Florida at this time, I was kind of sorry that this is the poem that I'm reading tonight. But maybe, Kate, that's your wisdom, you know, having selected is kind of prophetic, right? Floating island, just deserts. A glitch in the seismic activity, tectonic plates shifting beneath our feet like souls. The poles, a candle burning at both ends, islands of meringue, slowly drowning. The globe, a bowl of tepid custard as the dinner party winds down. The frogs no longer singing. Listen. The monarchs and their great migrations gone. Look. The great white shark hunts its tail. Stop it. Say you're sorry. Nowadays, everyone is a prophet. Everyone is at risk and everyone has a cause as we run out of irreducibles and hear the latest revelations. The next stage will be water. Continents as you know them will be broken pavement on the ocean floor, and the contents of your closets will litter the water like leaves.
Thank you, Barb. Our final writer for this evening is Margaret Sweatman. She's the author of 6 novels, most recently The Gunsmith's Daughter, which I just could not put down. Her 7th novel, Nightbirds, will be released by Goose Lane Editions next fall, which is something for all of us to look forward to. Margaret is also recently retired from the U of W, where she was a really important force for many young creative writers. Please welcome Margaret Sweatman.
I'm so grateful to Prairie Fire, to Kate, to all of you. This magazine, though, has kept me alive in a way, you know, kept up a purpose to write. Sometimes you feel a little bit crazy in your room. And then I remember that there's Prairie Fire. It's an enormous benefit. And Casey Adams, this is such a beautiful, beautiful cover. And all the work that's gone into it, it's just astounding. So thank you. Thank you, Charlene. I'm going to read from an excerpt. And believe me, it's 3 minutes. I had Salvatore sitting there just now. I have a story called Sounding the Name. And it takes place in St. Petersburg, Russia, before the war, before the assault on Ukraine. And it's, the woman is an unnamed woman over 60, and the man is a poet named Simon. They're at a literary seminar in St. Petersburg. They never planned to meet. She was almost always alone. If it happened that she was taking her first Americano with the St. Petersburg Times, he would stop by her table without sitting down. From this position, they'd become friends. She told him, I blew up my life last April. She said that she left all her things in London and had been on the lam for 3 months. Her house back in Montreal had probably burned down by now. She'd quit her job, something in software international, for she spoke French and German and English with a high-end drawl, a trace of the well-positioned colonial. She'd quit with a wave of her hand, everything, even the boyfriend. She said the boyfriend with rueful irony. She said ex-husband once, or perhaps it was plural. And my son doesn't need me anymore, with a tremulous laugh. Simon had the impression of a lot of money, the kind of money that makes sudden radical change possible. Simon told her, I'm 48 years old. One night he said, I don't know how to live. She shrugged her shoulders and observed pleasantly, you're losing power to a younger generation. They imagine that they're changing everything. Of course, they must be ruthless, but they're also condescending, don't you find? She smiled kindly. Your poetry is probably getting better and being published less often. She put a cigarette between her lips and handed him her lighter. When he lit it, she smoked in silence for several moments until he admitted, I've felt dead-ended since Hannah turned 40, since I accepted that I'll never have children. Hannah was his wife. He told her that they spoke on the phone every day. She gave him one of her peripheral glances, blowing smoke. Then she said, and yet it was ended, and the thing we have fulfilled, we have become. She laughed at the confusion she saw in his face and explained, that was a line from a John Ashbery poem. Ashbery, he repeated. He looked quite crestfallen, as if she'd taken something from him, and then added with a tone of professional resentment, poetry without personality. Poetry with everyone's personality, how we blur, waiting for the wait to be ended. He complimented her on her good memory, and she said, I have the memory of an elephant. Simon took a slug of ginger ale. I remember scenes vividly. What's difficult is naming things as they rush away from me. No wonder your poetry is so good. We're far too impressed by names. It's more frightening to let things alone, to let life be itself.
Thank you, Margaret. If that's your first time to hear Margaret Sweatman, then I'm going to tell you that delivery, you're always going to get that good a delivery. And if you're very fortunate, you should go hear her sing with the Broken Songs Band. Whew. I would like to thank all of these writers. Would you all stand, those of you who read tonight? And you as well, Kate, please stand up. Big round of applause. And do you want to look straight at the folks from Prairie Fire who make it all work? Yeah, stand up, you guys. huge accomplishment. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our hosts, McNally Robinson. They make such a beautiful space for us all to gather. It's wonderful to see everyone here, but also just to realize how at home and welcomed we are, and the chance to encounter lots of different voices and stories here. And a little special shout out to the Wizard of Oz, who hangs out behind the magic back there. And I have two last things to let you know. One is that the beautiful image that Casey has made appears on Prairie Fire bags. Is this like swank or what? Because you can visit the Prairie Fire website and order one. They also come in kind of a natural fiber, so very gorgeous. And of course, would you please buy a copy of the issue, which is over here. I've two things about that though. One is that you have to pay for it before you leave the store. The other thing is you can hang around here if you wish and get the writers to sign their stories, but before that, there's going to be a quick picture with all the writers. And I have been through this circuit enough to know that if people start to sign things before the photo, that photo ain't never gonna happen. So photo first and then plague them to do some signing, and then you can pay for your book on the way out. One more big thanks and round of applause. Thank you for coming. So good to have you here.